Hey guys, and today's video tutorial is about flashes, and we're talking about the off-camera flash that looks like this that goes on your camera. So one of the things that you should know is that there's a lot of choices when it comes to flashes, and you can buy those flashes that come with a manufacturer and are made by the manufacturer. But I just want you to know there's other choices out there, and in particular there's one that I always use and is a lot less expensive, and that is made by a Chinese company called Yongnuo. And Yongnuo makes some excellent flashes, and I'm just going to show you this before we go into our actual tutorial today about how to use the flashes and how to control your images. So this is the Yongnuo 563. Okay, so there's the number right there, and this is a wireless capable flash. So if you have a wireless controller, you can put it on your camera, it will flash this flash. This is the Canon 580 EX2. And as you can see, the size is almost identical. In fact, what's kind of interesting is if you look at the little kind of aesthetic hints on this camera, the Yongnuo, you'll see that they copied quite a few of the features of the Canon to make it almost, I mean, even with the way that everything is set up, the little buttons and things, they're identical, right? This one is really, really close, almost exactly the same level of power as the Canon. Okay, so it fires at the same distance. It's got zoom capabilities. It's got a lot of capabilities. Now, there's a reason why this costs more, and let's talk about how much more. The Yongnuo flash, this one here, costs about $70 at Amazon, which is an awesome price for a strobe, for a flash, okay? This one is about $680 made by Canon. And there's a reason why it costs more. There is. I mean, there are things that this does that this doesn't do. But for all intents and purposes, this does a whole lot. And I use this more often than this for a lot of reasons. I mean, for $70, this one can break. You can buy lots more of them. Again, they're quite powerful, but you need to know how to use the manual capability of them. So with that being said, we're now going to go into a tutorial to show you how to use this flash, the $70 flash, effectively on your camera. And there are a few things that you need to be able to do, and one of them is how to set the power of it. And that's just about it, honestly. This little button here will increase the power in that direction, and it will decrease the power in this direction. Let's see there. So what that means is by pushing the button up or down, you're going to make this be brighter or not as bright. And that's really all you need to do. You need to trigger the flash, and you need to make it brighter or softer depending on the circumstances. So with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at a video I created on how to use the flash and certain components of the camera in order to balance out your images and control your image. Hey guys, today we're going to learn how to use a flash in conjunction with camera settings in order to control every aspect, both the background and the foreground subject in your picture. So what we're going to be doing today is setting our camera on manual and using manual controls on the flash as well. And in order to make it a little bit more simple, we're going to take out one dynamic of the exposure triangle on the manual mode, and we're going to keep the ISO constant. So we're not going to change that, at least not for the lesson today. By keeping that constant, we're only going to change the aperture and the shutter speed and the flash power and see what difference it makes. So on this first picture, we're going to just call this the normal picture. We've set it to an aperture of f.8 at 1/50th of a second, and all of the pictures today are going to be taken at an ISO of 200. So here is a picture without the flash on, and the only difference between this and this picture is that I turned on the flash. So you'll notice that the background doesn't change, of course, because the flash is simply too far away from the background in order to affect the background. Now, of course, it would affect the background if the background was very close, like right behind the subject matter, but then you might as well consider the background to be part of the foreground, so the flash affects it and all whatnot. So let's take a look at see what happens when you turn on the flash. Obviously, the foreground lights up and your subject matter is lit. And of course, as you turn up the flash, the foreground will get brighter or dimmer by controlling the flash. However, the background, you're not going to affect the background. So that's something to keep in mind, is you're not going to change the amount of light coming from the back by changing the flash. All right, let's go ahead and go back to normal here. And in the next set of pictures, we're going to take a look to see what difference it makes when you change the shutter speed. So on here, we've got the shutter speed at 1/50th of a second. And on here, we've got it at 1/100th of a second. And you'll notice between these two pictures that by changing the shutter speed, you are actually controlling the background light, but you are not controlling the foreground light because the flash is not going to be affected by the shutter speed. Now, you want to make sure that you have your shutter speed somewhere under 1/200th of a second, because going beyond that, problems can occur. And it has to do with high-speed syncing, and we're not going to get into that into this lesson. But by changing your shutter speed, you can control the background to be darker, or you can control the background to be lighter. And notice that the foreground subject doesn't change much at all. So that is a very powerful tool if you wanted to darken the background. Let's say you wanted a nice dramatic sunset, or you wanted to brighten the background to balance it evenly, to make it look natural, whatever. So the last set of pictures, we're going to change the final aspect. So far we've changed the flash power to show how you can change the foreground subject and the brightness there. We've changed the shutter speed to show how you can change the background. And on this next set, we're going to change the aperture. And by changing the aperture, it actually affects both. So the background and the foreground are both affected. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, actually, there's a couple reasons. Of course, by changing the aperture, you change the depth of field, so you can make the background blurrier or clearer depending on that. So you might want to control that. But the other thing too is if you get the background to a brightness that you like, however, maybe the flash is a little bright, you can actually reduce the flash power and it'll look more like this picture here, where you reduce the flash power and you still get the background and the foreground balance the way you want. This might be, the reason you might want to do this is if your flash power, you're already maxed out and you don't have any more flash power and yet you want to reduce it. Or once again, if you wanted to balance things out and still control the background blurriness. So as you can see, you can actually control different aspects of the picture. You control it, not your camera, by changing the flash power, the shutter speed, the aperture. And once again, you can, of course, it'll be affected by the ISO, but we're not touching that today, just because obviously then everything changes on the other aspects as well. Hopefully that was helpful to you. Go through this tutorial once again if you want to kind of ingrain in your brain which aspects of camera control and flash power make a difference in your picture. All right, hopefully that was helpful to you. If you want to learn more about photography, head on over to pocketlenses.com.